All right, YouTube, back to politics. There was a really, really retarded article in Bloomberg today about how Trump can still be stopped. All they have to do is vote at the convention. That is not the delegates. The delegates are bound. But the people overseeing the convention itself, namely Paul Ryan and, the other people that are with Paul Ryan that don't, necessarily like Trump, they range from hostile to him to kind of ambivalent to, oh, I don't know, we'll settle for Trump. At least it's not like Hillary Clinton. That's basically the range of people you've got under Paul Ryan. I guess the new idea, we saw all of the other plans to stop Trump fail miserably. And yet, people who didn't like Trump, lay people who didn't really even understand how a convention works, how delegates work, how voting in general operates, half of them probably weren't even fucking registered to vote. They kept weighing in and saying, oh, we're going to stop Trump this time. This time will be different from all the last times. And of course, it always failed. So now the new thing is they're going to vote to suspend the rules at the convention, free the delegates to allow them to vote for whoever they want to vote for. That is, none of them would be pledged to anyone. And then you simply need less than 50% of them to actually vote for Trump. Now, first, it'd probably be a spectacular failure even if they were desperate enough to do that, because chances are most of those delegates would vote for him anyway. In fact, he might get a boost because it would essentially free delegates that are currently pledged on the first ballot to Rubio, Kasich, Cruz, people who can't possibly win. No delegate's going to vote for them if they're freed up and able to vote for who they want, because what would the point be? It's clear that they've lost the election bid. Secondly, I don't think that there's any possibility whatsoever that even Paul Ryan, who is a miserable individual, who is a little bit odd, and who did oversee, as the VP nominee under Mitt Romney, one of the worst campaigns of modern history, certainly akin to the Mondale campaign. I don't think even he is moronic enough to try to do that. It's become clear at this point who the nominee clearly is. He's already clinched it. If he were to be robbed of that, he would run as an independent. Most of the Republican Party would probably abandon ranks, and what you may end up seeing is a chaotic free-for-all, handing the election to the Democrats or maybe to Trump as an independent. Maybe he could still pull it off. Maybe Johnson would suddenly shoot up to 35%. Who knows? Regardless, though, it's not going to happen. The Never Trump crowd, the Ben Shapiros and the Glenn Becks of the world, have been deluding themselves now for literally months that there's some sort of magic elixir that they can take to free themselves of Donald Trump, because they happen to disagree with him on one or two issues, which really at the end of the day is what it boils down to, essentially. They don't like him because he understands he comprehends the concept of the nation state and doesn't want an internationalist system. That is, he doesn't support globalism. And number two, he's not really buddy-buddy with all of these corporations and sucking their teat for money for campaign contributions, and therefore he might go rogue. He might decide not to get us involved in a war that the globalists want us to get involved in for trade reasons, which is essentially what it all boils down to, trade and money. It's not even just oil, it's the money from oil. If oil wasn't a valuable resource, nobody would care. It's about money and power. That's what globalism really boils down to. When people talk about globalism, so often they make the mistake of likening it to one or the other political party. I can remember when people talked about globalism when Bush was the president, most of the time they were young liberals, myself included at the time. At least I considered myself one because I didn't know libertarianism even existed. They spoke about, oh, George W. wants like this weird Western imperialism, it's globalism, it's the New World Order. They were kind of right, but what they didn't realize, of course, was the Democrats that were out of power are essentially the same. Obama has done the same thing. Increasingly, more and more Americans, to the point where it may now be a majority of Americans, realize the two-party system is defunct. They realize that most Democrats and most Republicans are fundamentally arguing for the same things. They will be pro or anti-war depending on which one will make them more money. They'll be for or against a different civil right depending on whether it gets them more money and power. They'll be friendly with or ambivalent towards or hostile to some other state in the world depending on whether there's money to be made in the process. That's essentially what they're their mode of thought boils down to. It's really sad because it's extremely limited. It boils down larger strategies to mere materialism in the short-term interest in many cases. It's a really retarded way to operate. It really is sort of like a Rome before the fall situation, and we really do need to reform that. Actually, honestly, to see this many people act so chaotic towards Trump makes it more likely that I would support him as a candidate. I will say that. It makes him more appealing as a candidate because clearly he has stirred up just the right people, because it is almost a laundry list of everybody that I completely hate that I think doesn't deserve to be in office. Not just the Feinsteins and the Pelosi's and the Reids and the Obamas, the warmongering, anti-Second Amendment, anti-Fourth Amendment Democrats, but at the same time, people like Karl Rove, people like Glenn Beck, people like Ben Shapiro. These fall into different categories. You've got the Karl Roves. They're just a bunch of military nuts that make a lot of money off of war. They're a bunch of ham-headed retards. Then you've got the Ben Shapiros. They're Zionists. They believe that other nations' interests should be protected. You know, Israel should remain homogenous, but this country, fuck borders. Borders are racist and evil. Then you've got the Glenn Becks. They're like, oh, praise Jesus. Jesus should be in charge. Fuck the Constitution. But at the same time, I'm going to pretend that I've got a boner about the Constitution because the president's a Democrat. All of these people are complete morons. I realize that, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, and it actually makes me feel more positively towards somebody like Trump when I hear this. I would like to point out the concept that this would tip the scale, that this scandal, I said this before, would be the end-all be-all, the final end to Trump's campaign, is number one, probably almost totally wrong. I don't think that's going to happen. And number two, if it were the thing that caused the GOP to revolt and refuse to support him and force him to the sidelines, just refuse to fundraise or kick him out at the convention or whatever, remote as that chance may be, it would show that the Republican Party has absolutely no toleration or respect towards the United States. It would show that they're traitors, essentially. That's exactly what they would be doing. They would be committing treason. Why? The concept that Trump does not also, he's not a politician, he's not yet in an elected office, he is a private citizen at the moment. He's campaigning, but he's still a private citizen. The idea that he doesn't get to say he thinks there is a reason why there might be a conflict of interest because some La Raza judge may take offense to the fact that he wants to build a wall on the Mexican border. The fact that there would be politicians, sitting politicians within his own party no less, and also in other parties as well, who would think that that was somehow unacceptable or racist is completely foolish. Paul Ryan, the most foolish of them all. Oh, this is textbook racism. Mexican is not a race. He is making a legal claim. However crazy you may think that claim is, I happen to think that the judge is capable of making a cognizant decision, regardless of the fact that the judge happens to be Hispanic. But the idea that it is unacceptable, taboo, that it is evil or bigoted or should be banned for somebody to say such a thing, that's a violation of the First Amendment, quite clearly. Now, I've heard plenty of times when people who are black, they say, oh, this black man was on trial and the jury was too white. No wonder they got convicted. This black man was on trial. The judge was white. No wonder they went to prison. This dude killed a black man. The judge was white. No wonder he got off scot-free for killing that defenseless black man. Case in point, Trayvon Martin or something like that. Now, where was the outrage when those claims were made? Where was the outrage when people were directing their ire at the legal system of the United States, which, by the way, I don't have much confidence in either? Where was the outrage when the claims were coming from black individuals saying the police were racist because too white, this judge is racist because too white, the jury was racist, the attorney was racist, the legal system itself is systemic in racism? Where was the outrage over that? How is that claim any different from what Donald Trump is saying? The fact that he happens to have been pegged as a racist bigot by the media and by some members of the other party. The fact that he happens to have a lot of Facebook likes and Twitter fans does not make him an automatic Nazi for making this suggestion. Perhaps he actually feels that way because he's intelligent enough to realize, yeah, I've spent the last few months talking about wanting to deport people and build a wall. I don't even have to agree, by the way, with deportation to realize, yes, indeed, if this judge, as a Hispanic individual, has any racial sentiment at all, it could end up influencing the case. It would be like someone, oh, I was in the Klan 20 years ago and became a judge, but don't worry, I can fairly judge whether this black man actually raped this chick here. Don't worry about the fact that I was in the Klan 20 years ago. Or, yeah, I may have made a couple of white pride posts on Facebook, but it's all good. It's not really racist because reasons. It's the same exact thing. People would have outrage over such a thing. But in this case, they see, oh, it involves Trump, and it involves somebody who Trump attacked, therefore automatic victim card. I don't think so. I don't happen to agree with that. He can say that about the judge if he wants, and all these people clamoring for the judge to order like a gag order. You do realize that essentially gives Trump the win, because he can then say, oh, I'm not even allowed to talk about that retard over there because of a gag order, because the establishment doesn't want me to talk. It was funny that Newt Gingrich sort of had a balanced approach. He's like, well, what Trump said wasn't really acceptable, but whatever. That was a more balanced approach, as opposed to like Paul Ryan, he just goes off kilter. Since when is it racist to suggest that a person, a government official in the judiciary, could have a racial bias? How is this unacceptable? This is not some run-of-the-mill civilian owning, someone at the supermarket, somebody on the street. This is a government official, a judge. There's a different standard involved. It's a judge. Who gives a fuck if this judge feels a little bit affronted by the fact that he was confronted with his Hispanic privilege or whatever? Who gives a fuck? It's a judge, a person who makes six-figure salary to throw people in prison or to make them pay money to the government or whatever. Why the hell should I care? And anyone who thinks that it matters anyway, Trump has already been pegged now for more than a year as a xenophobe and a vile bigot. So anyone who thinks this, who didn't think already that he was a bigot, isn't going to suddenly magically begin thinking he is now. Paul Ryan's way out in left field. I mean, again, I hate having to constantly make Trump videos, but this is turning into the biggest fiasco of the election, in an election that's already filled with stupidity. It's filled with drama. It's filled with absolute bullshit on all possible sides. We have a male stripper at the Libertarian Convention. We have a Democratic nominee who's being investigated by the FBI. We have a Republican nominee who's not even particularly well received by most members of his own party. We have the Green Party, which is about as relevant as it always has been, which is to say not at all. It's no choice 2016 in a lot of ways for many people. I can understand why people are bitter at politics at this point. Now, I happen to think that Trump simply has a bit of verbal diarrhea. He speaks ahead of his thoughts in many cases. I kind of exonerate him. I don't really give a fuck. I don't think he's as dangerous as some people think. I don't think he's some magical Hitler. And I don't mind Gary Johnson. But I can understand why people who are less abnormal than me, I realize I'm not fully normal. I mean, look at my fucking YouTube channel for a second. Look at the stuff that I write. Look at Morbid Stories, which, new edition of that coming down the pipeline, you'll get to see for yourself. I can understand why the average run-of-the-mill, like picket fence, middle-income family with the 2-car garage and, 2 kids and a dog, I can understand why they'd feel a little bit overburdened by this election, a little bit burnt out at this point, because this is just almost too much for me, and I actually like the political drama. I find it funny. At this point, it's just getting weird. So, yeah, this is just another freak show, but it's not going to happen. They're not going to take Trump's nomination away at the convention by voting to release the delegates, because even if they did, they'd vote for Trump. He'd get more votes that way, because all those Rubio delegates and Cruz delegates, they say, fuck it. We're just going to vote for Trump. I mean, it's not like we'll be unified enough to vote for anyone else anyway. What's the fucking point? Paul Ryan is fooling himself. These people at Bloomberg are certainly fooling themselves. All the Cruz fans, if you're a partisan, you should be voting for Trump. If you're not a partisan, do whatever the hell you want. Don't be a hypocrite. That's about all. Peace out.